You're listening to The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm Grant Hardy. Canada's next federal election is on Monday, April 28th. On April 8th, all the parties were invited to a debate on accessibility issues in Canada, organized by over 13 nonpartisan disability organizations. That debate took place at the headquarters of the CNIB Toronto offices, as well as on Zoom, and it can be watched on the AODA Alliance's YouTube channel. To review some of the big takeaways from the debate is David Lepofsky, chair of the AODA Alliance. And David, thank you for joining us today on the Pulse.
Always good to be here.
I have to really hand it to you and everyone else who worked to organize this, because it was an incredibly, I would imagine the logistics were huge. And that's kind of something I'm curious about in terms of securing accessibility, attendance, all that. How much work was this?
It was a huge amount of work, and it was made more difficult, as in the recent Ontario election when the same group did the same kind of event, because it was a snap election. Normally, when you know an election is coming up in months, you can canvass people and work out dates and times. In this case, we went from the first phone call to the actual event in under 2 weeks. And it was important for us to do it early in the campaign because we found in Ontario's election in February that we had several hundred people actually attend our all candidates debate online or in person. But then we posted it on YouTube, and we got way more people watching after. So we wanted to get this done early enough in the campaign so we could capitalize on that. Well, that just meant a ton of work. And one of the things I've learned, just as one of the many folks involved in planning this, is that there are just so many moving parts, from sign language to attendant care to captioning to where are we going to do this to which AV equipment are we using to which IT equipment. And so anyway, I don't want to burden you with all the tedium, but what AMI just does as a routine when you're interviewing people is for lay people quite a phenomenon to get their arms around.
Well, I hope that people do watch it on YouTube, and your numbers are already getting up there. A lot of people are watching, so people really do care about being able to access this. So thank you.
I want to apologize in advance that one thing that did not go well, the amplification of the speakers in the room was just fine. But we found out afterwards that the miking did not. There was some breakdown so that it's hard to hear the candidates some of the time. Or some of the candidates, and I'm upset about that, as we all are. And of course, after the fact, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. These things happen. So let's get into some of the key takeaways from the event. So the Conservatives and Bloc Québécois were invited to the event and chose not to attend or not to send anybody. Is there a way we can access their accessibility platforms, and what messaging do you think that those parties are sending?
Well, we've heard nothing from them. Now, the Bloc is in a different position, and I want to emphasize we're not partisan. We're not there to tell anybody who to vote for or against. But this was an Ontario-focused debate, though the issues, of course, are national. But the Bloc isn't running anyone in Ontario, and we all understood that. Yeah. But the Conservatives have lots of candidates in Ontario in every riding, I guess. We don't have a clue what they're going to do, what if anything, they're offering to do. We wrote them, the AODA Alliance wrote all the party leaders back on March 21st, asking for them to make what we call the Accessible Canada Pledge. And we aren't covering every issue that matters to people with disabilities, but we're trying to cover a number that are important. And the three that we addressed, I think will affect all of our listeners and viewers. They are the need to substantially improve the sluggish and weak implementation of the Accessible Canada Act to tear down barriers that people with disabilities face in the federal sphere in access to air travel, banking, telecommunication, federal government services, interprovincial rail travel, and so on. The second, which a bit overlaps, we're asking what they're prepared to do to end the horrific recurring mistreatment of air passengers with disabilities on Canadian airlines. Now, last year there were hearings on this, an all-party committee, and it rendered a report up on our website, aodaalliance.org/transportation, with a number of important recommendations, quoting with approval recommendations from a number of leading disability organizations. I mean, they listened. And fine if they render a report, but what are they promising in the election? The third is taking real effective action to end disability poverty in Canada. A couple of years ago, the government passed the the Canada Disability Benefit. It was supposed to lift people with disabilities out of poverty, who are living in poverty, hundreds of thousands, they said. But they then passed regulations that capped what you could get per month, no matter how poor you are, at $200. And that's not going to, listen, any money is better than no money, but it's not going to lift anyone, or very few at best, out of poverty. So we want to know what they're going to do to strengthen it. Now, on all these issues, all three issues, federal parties who disagree on almost everything, on our stuff they agree. So they agree with the goals. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, so a couple things here. First of all, that's something I was curious about, and I was going to ask you that almost every disability issue seems to be pretty nonpartisan. I don't think anybody really said, we disagree with ending legislative poverty. It was maybe different in terms of approach, but everyone kind of agreed with the issues. Do you think that helps us, or does it maybe hurt us a little bit in that it's not such a big debatable issue? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I think it helps us.
Okay.
Now, not every disability issue secures agreement by the federal government. So the federal government will, at least the Liberals are going to say, I expect, that they're doing a great job implementing the Accessible Canada Act and so on. And that's part of the political game, and I understand that. But also, one of the issues that came up at the candidates debate was the government's substantial liberalization of doctor-assisted suicide, which they call medical assistance in dying. That's kind of a way to candy coat it. But it's doctors helping people kill themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think we want to candy coat it. Now, wherever you stand on the debate about it, there are serious disability concerns about the fact that it's been too liberalized and there aren't enough safeguards to protect vulnerable people with disabilities. Now, the parties don't agree on this one, as far as I've seen before the election. What we're going to hear during the election, if anything, we'll see.
So it kind of struck me that with Track 2 MAID / doctor-assisted suicide, the parties that are likely to be elected didn't seem to really have a strong understanding of what Track 2 MAID even is versus just sort of like made to end people's suffering. Do you think that's accurate? And was there any takeaway that you had from that discussion of Track 2 MAID?
The biggest disagreement I'm going to expect, just from my knowledge of the issue from before this debate, is between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Now, the fact that the Conservatives did not find it with themselves to actually send anyone to tell us what they would do for people with disabilities as elected, or if they're elected, is obviously really troubling, because they want to form the next government. And you want anybody who wants to form the next government to be prepared to answer your questions. They didn't. But they generally, as I understand it, the Conservatives have wanted to be more restrictive on doctor-assisted suicide than have the liberals.
Okay, that's interesting. At least the parties that were in attendance, I didn't get the sense they maybe even understood sort of what Track 2 Made actually is, but it could have also been the context of the debate and just remaining polite and that sort of thing.
I think that I certainly wouldn't disagree with your read on it. And in fairness, these candidates all articulated a strong interest in advocating for people with disabilities if they form government. But, for example, the Liberal candidate said, look, they haven't announced their platform yet.
Yep.
So she would just say what she would push for. The NDP candidate was able to speak to a few things where they've got announced platforms, and otherwise said, but I would advocate for what you're asking for. The Green candidate, the Green candidate was the only one who's actually a sitting MP, and he was able to talk, I think, with a bit more specificity because he had brought motions and pushed for amendments on some of the issues that we were there talking about.
So going back to the Canada Disability Benefit, again, just thinking of the parties that are likely to be elected, it strikes me that really nothing is going to be happening with that. At best, we heard that the NDP would double the benefit, which will still not remove that legislative party. We heard from the Liberals that they will sort of nudge the Prime Minister if possible. Are you getting the same read on that? How can we make this a more hot button issue? And do you get the same read on this?
Well, for all of these, listen, for all of these, when candidates are out on the, knocking on doors, they're given the platform. They don't make the platform.
Yep.
Now, it is always worthwhile to, and we encourage people to, press candidates if they come to your door. What are you going to do for us? And because if they don't hear from us, that is not going to be a priority for them, or it's less likely to be a priority. And if there's enough of that pressure at the door, then it can percolate up. And it can percolate up either during the campaign or after the campaign, and when one of those parties forms government, the other one is in opposition, deciding what issues are worth spending their verbal firepower on. So that's the critical piece here. The other critical piece, which got mentioned, I think a little bit, but I could be wrong because there was so much going on, is the issue about barriers to accessible voting for voters with disabilities, like people who are blind or vision impaired. Elections Canada does not offer any voting options that actually ensures that a blind voter can independently mark their own ballot without assistance in private and then verify that the ballot was marked the way they want to. The only options they offer are having someone else mark your ballot. Well, that doesn't guarantee you the right to vote, mark your own ballot in private. And doesn't let you know whether it was actually marked the way you wanted. Now, I'm not saying anybody's going to, deliberately lie to you, but, people can make mistakes. People can accidentally spoil ballots. The only way you can know it for sure is if you do it yourself and can verify it. They offer, I believe, a Braille overlay where you can, mark in the hole. But the problem is if that you don't know if that thing is lined up right. And if it's not lined up right, you may end up spoiling your ballot. And you can't check the ballot yourself to see if it's good enough. A mail-in ballot has all these problems.
Yeah.
And so there's, and this is all happening. More than 42 years since the Charter of Rights was enacted. It includes two rights that matter to us, the right to vote and a guarantee of equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination because of disability. And this violates all of that. And the Accessible Canada Act promised an accessible Canada by 2040. It was passed in 2019, and we don't see any real changes. There was, I've talked to some reporters about this, and the media response they got from Elections Canada, and I'm just telling you what they told me, was that they were working on an app to provide for accessible voting, but it's not ready yet. Well, I don't have a clue what the app is. If they're working on something, that's great, but like, this is not a new problem. We didn't just invent the paper ballot, and we sure didn't just invent blind people. So I don't know why this can't be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to be chatting with Elections Canada later in the episode, but I certainly can't disagree that the only way you can kind of guarantee that you're voting the way you want to is to bring someone you trust. I certainly would not trust myself enough to be able to make a mark on a ballot and have it be in the right place and accessible.
And the thing is, that's not a secret ballot. Yes, the person swears an oath not to tell anyone, but who knows if 10 years from now, they remember. Who knows if they're a trusted person 10 years from now? They might be your closest friend now, and you have a falling out later. You know, who knows? And the other thing that matters in this area is if you go to their website, Elections Canada, and if people sign up to get AODA Alliance updates, we provide updates on this. So you just go to www.aodaalliance.org, and right on the homepage you can click on the link for signing up to get our updates. So just type in your email address and you get them. Well, we sent out an update a few days ago, which lists from the Elections Canada website what they say they're doing. And they've got this language, I'm paraphrasing, except for one key word. They say they're continuously working on this issue, on ensuring accessible voting. Continuously. That makes it sound like, you walk into Elections Canada any day of the week and they're working on it. And forgive me, if they were continuously working on this since 2019 when the Accessible Canada Act was passed, or since 1982 when the Charter of Rights was passed, we wouldn't be in this pickle.
It's a tough one. It's really good to know. I was going to ask you how people can become the most informed voters that they can, and definitely the AODA Alliance website is really useful across Canada. We have a couple minutes left here, so I just want you to talk about the Accessible Canada Pledge and what you've heard back from the party so far.
So far, and they've had now over 2 weeks to answer, probably 3 maybe. But in any event, since the 21st of March, and as of the time that you and I are talking, the only party who's answered is the Green Party. And to their credit, they have pledged to make the Accessible they have said they make the Accessible Canada Pledge. So categorically, we sent them the 3 major themes and all the points we want, and they just said, yes, we're doing it. And if you want to see that pledge, go to the AODA Alliance website. We have a whole link just on our advocacy in this federal election, and you can just track everything we're doing. And you can find the link to watch the All Candidates debate in Toronto on disability issues. Now, that we're not the only ones. The consortium of 13 disability organizations that organize this, we're not the only ones organizing these. There was one the same night in Winnipeg. I've heard of others who are working on one. So watch out for those too.
Watch out for those. Absolutely watch anything possible that comes up. I think this election is going to be super important to be informed on which issues affect you and matter to you most. David, thank you so much, not only for joining us on The Pulse, but also just for all the incredibly hard work you've been doing along with those other organizations to help all of us really be more informed voters. Thank you so much.
Thanks for discussing this.
Thanks again to David Lepofsky for joining me to talk about the upcoming Canadian federal election. I also wanted to share this snippet of a conversation I had with David last month about the Ontario provincial election. In this clip, David's going to talk about the importance of all candidate debates and the ways that a minority government can create change.
Well, this is the responsibility of the community. There's nothing in law that said there shall be all candidates debates of any sort. In your riding, wherever you live, if there is one, it's because your local, some community organization or church group or business association decide to convene one, and they organize it often at the last minute. And they invite the candidates to come, and the candidates have to scramble from one to the next, and so on. In this case, normally when there's a fixed term election, or community organizations have a lot of lead time. You could know 5 months in advance, reach out to other groups, divide up the work. In this case, what happened was a group of us started working together very quickly to pull together an event, a debate. And then I happened to find out that another group of disability organizations were doing the same thing at the same time. So I called up one of the people from their group, and because everybody's slapping this thing together really fast, I said, why don't we work together? And everybody said, absolutely. And we got on a Zoom call, and we had this fantastic collaboration with one organization arranging attendant care, another organization providing the premises, another one providing the sign language and captioning, and so on. It was just an incredible, and another one, writing the news release and stuff, collaboration. And then it got pulled together, and it happened. And I can tell you, we're going to want to do this again at the federal level. There are incredible logistic challenges. We had it in person and on Zoom, and the intent was to have the Zoom live streamed. But the live stream on our YouTube channel just didn't work. It was tested out by some of our volunteers multiple times to be sure it worked, and then when they hit the stream button, it didn't happen. So we had to wait a day, of course, to put it up online, and we're getting those views now. But anyway, so if anybody hearing this interview thinks it's worth doing, just get some people together. If you're connected with an organization, it's great if you pull together a couple. What ends up happening is a few people do kind of the heavy lifting in terms of coordinating things. But then we had a list of, 11 or 12 organizations who were listed as co-sponsoring. Now, that's not writing checks and stuff. It's just, it was part of a collect. And the message to the candidates is, and the public, that there's a large group of people here working together on this.
And there's a lot of parties working on doubling the ODSP, right? And I keep going back to this because this is the biggest deal coming out of this debate. It was almost the reason, like the impetus for gathering it in the first place, if I understood correctly. Now, another topic that was brought up by the debate that I thought was really interesting, especially when you consider that the PCs and Doug Ford are still pretty firmly in the lead in the polls, is how can you affect change if you're the opposition party? And I'd like to ask you that question directly, David. What's your perspective on that?
Well, there's several things that happen because we've worked with governments, we've worked with opposition parties, we've worked with opposition parties when the government is committed to us, we've worked with the opposition parties when the government's not. I can tell you that when the AODA was brought before the legislature to be passed in 2005 by the Dalton McGuinty Liberals. They had been in opposition at first, and they were sold on the importance of the issue. And when they saw the Mike Harris Tories in the 90s promise us legislation but deliver a bill that was laughably weak, the Liberals were like chomping at the bit to get into power to do things, and this was one of them. And they were very excited when they got into power, and they did it. I remember the day the bill got introduced for first reading and they had a little gathering to celebrate. One of the senior cabinet ministers who had approached us early on when they were in opposition and said to me, "This is what I went into public life for, like to make things better." Mm-hmm. Now, that's from what I believe. Liberals, conservatives, Greens, NDP, that's what they all are there for. They have different visions of how to do it, but they're all there for that reason. So when they're in opposition, it becomes an opportunity to get them excited about an issue and fluent with an issue. And sometimes they can, through question period and other actions, broker some improvements. Now, if the government becomes a majority government, the opposition can do less. But I got to tell you, when Dalton McGuinty got elected, the Conservatives, who, while in power, were not prepared to pass strong legislation, only weak legislation. When they got into opposition, they were prepared to push the Liberals to make amendments to strengthen the Liberal bill at our request. So there are times and also there's, when they're in opposition, it's always about building relationships. Mm-hmm. I mean, the leader of the NDP right now, and we're prepared to work with any of them, is Marit Stiles. Well, I first met her in the 90s when she was a staffer in the NDP research office and had our file. And so that's how we first got to know each other, and that's how she first got to know the file. So you build those kind of relationships with any and all of the parties that are prepared to work with you. And the final thing I'll tell you is if there is a minority government, there's, of course, tons you can do with the opposition because they have a majority of seats in the legislature. So, like, when I asked the question about the opposition parties, about the current opposition parties, would you be prepared to work together on our issues? That would be especially important if Ford gets reelected with a minority and we have an opportunity to coordinate with the opposition using their majority of votes to possibly move some things forward.
This is The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm your host, Grant Hardy. If you want to listen to this episode again, you can find it on YouTube as a video podcast or in audio on any major podcast platforms. Thanks so much for listening to The Pulse on AMI Audio.